everybody. Welcome back from break. I hope you had a good rest and are ready to get going. So our virtual lesson this week consists of this. It's something called a word cluster. And what you're going to do is, I'm going to illustrate this for you. We're going to take several words that have some relevance, and that's because they're attached or relevant to a historical development, and you know what those are. We're going to put them together to show how really you should be studying. Again, you should be studying terms, historical facts, and know how they are used to support the historical developments that we've been looking at all along. You've done this year so far in making arguments. You've done this in the positive connections, and you'll see why that was important right here. So the first cluster of words that I'm going to tell you about, or I'm going to model for you, come from last semester's content from topic 4.6. So you know those topic pages, 4.6. So I'm going to give you an example of the historical development and show you what we need to do here. So 4.6 is this: internal and external challenges to state power from 1450 to 1750. And I chose that because I think this is something that you read on your own last semester, and you may have annotated the topic page or something. So I want to kind of reinforce that. So one of the historical developments is that state expansion and centralization led to resistance from an array of social, political, and economic groups on a local level. So basically, states had a hard time managing themselves because they were met with resistance. Now, that development is prime fodder for an LEQ essay or a DBQ essay on the AP test. So what you should do is you should take that and you should explain it. You should turn it into a question, the learning objective into a question, and see how the illustrative examples or the things that you know from history can be used to support that. So let me model this. An essay prompt you might get from this topic on the AP test could be something like this: analyze obstacles to imperial expansion and centralization in the period 1450 to 1750. So what were the obstacles to that? Imperial, by the way, is just the adjective form of empire. So basically they're wanting to know what was an impediment, what was an obstacle to empires expanding in this time period. And the answer, of course, as you know, is in the historical development, that they were met with resistance. So we would want to come up with a prompt to answer that. And we do that by first thinking, okay, what content do we know? What do we know about resistance to imperial centralization? And a couple examples, and these are in the illustrative examples there on the page of topic 4.6. One is the Marathas. So the Marathas are relevant to the Mughal Empire. Another one are Maroon Societies. And Maroon Societies, that was actually in the positive connection I gave you. Maroon Societies are relevant really to the Spanish and Portuguese empires. And then another one was the Cossacks, and this is relevant to the Russian Empire. That was in your reading from AMSCO, but I didn't talk about that in my videos. Remember, you don't have to know all of the illustrated examples. You just have to know enough that you could make an argument here. So that's just like the menu that you can choose from. So let's look at this, for example. First of all, Marathas, who are they? You remember, the Mughals were Muslims, a minority of Muslims who ruled South Asia, which was predominantly Hindu. And of course, Akbar was the great leader, and he practiced tolerance, remember? He tolerated Muslims, he tried to create the divine faith and blend religions, and he allowed open discussion of all these religions. And that was a golden age, you might say, during the Mughals. But when he died, you got much less tolerant emperors coming to power. So Marathas were those who resented the control by the Muslims. And they reinstated that tax on non-Muslims. So now the Marathas had to pay tax. All Hindus had to pay tax. And Hindu temples went into ruin. They weren't maintained. And on the western border of the South Asian subcontinent, there in what is today India, several kingdoms came together, the Marathas, and they would rebel against Mughal rule. And it was fueled by, of course, religion. The resentment of being ruled by invaders who had a very different faith than theirs. So that's an example of resistance or an obstacle to putting together or centralizing power. The Mughals aren't really ruling as well as they could if you got a rebellion in one area and they refuse to recognize the rule of the Mughals. So you have the Marathas. And by the way, if you look at 4.6 on AP Worldopedia, it explains all about the Mughals and the Marathas there. Another one, the Maroon Societies. Maroon Societies is the name given to these societies of slaves who were able to escape the brutal work in the Spanish and Portuguese in coming into all the plantations and so forth. And they gathered together someplace in the northern parts of South America, for example, in the mountains, and they kind of hid out and created societies. So they managed to go undiscovered. They're runaway slaves who formed their own societies. So if they're running away, that meant that the Spanish or the Portuguese have lost some control there. And it also means that they've lost labor. If they've lost labor, it's going to cost them wealth. So that's an obstacle. Loss of labor, wealth, and control, that's an obstacle to centralizing their power. And we could make an argument for the Cossacks in Russia, but remember, you don't need to know all of these, but that's another example. There's a whole list of them here on that page, by the way. So this is the stuff that you should know to argue back and make an argument as you would in an essay. So in this word cluster assignment, I would have resistance as a central word. Around resistance, I would have Cossacks, Marathas, Maroon Societies. I could go on and on and on over here, but I won't. And what you would do is you would take the historical development or the learning objective, you will answer it in a prompt, and you'll have to show the relevance of these words I'm going to give you, Maroon Societies and Marathas, and argue back about how they constituted a obstacle to state expansion and centralization, which is what that learning objective is all about on topic 4.6. So I'm going to give you one that's different from that one, and it's important that you do this. What you'll do, you're going to come up with a claim, and you're going to use the words I give you in this word cluster to support that claim. We've been doing this since way back when we took caravanserai and paper money and showed how that supported the idea, or that supported the development, that there was an increase in the trade of luxury goods, and that was way back in topic 2.1. So this is an old, something you should be practiced in. So you're going to see a cluster. This cluster is from the time period that we're already done with it. We just finished before break. And you're going to put together a single paragraph by pooling together a cluster of words by showing their relevance. Anything you could throw in when you do this, by the way, is going to be helpful for you. Let me model that for a second. So let's say you have this prompt where you have to analyze obstacles to imperial expansion and centralization in the period 1450 to 1750. And your claim, and this is your first sentence in your paragraph, needs to answer that right back. It could be, a major obstacle to imperial expansion and centralization was resistance from local groups that weakened the rule of empires. See, you didn't just say there was rebellions or there was resistance. Remember, to get the point for a claim, it has to have a line of reasoning. So it's got to be more than just, here is the problem, blah, one word. Notice this again. It says the major obstacle to imperial expansion and centralization was resistance from local groups that weakened the rule of empires. That has a line of reasoning. Most of the words from this claim are found in that prompt, so you just use them to fire right back. Now, how would you deal with Marathas? You could put this: Marathas, a powerful confederation of Hindu people in the west side of South Asia, launched several raids against the Mughal leaders of the empire, thus weakening their power. I want you to notice something about this sentence that we're using in this paragraph. This is the format of the appositive connections that you did all last semester. I'm showing you how you would work that into an argument. Marathas, that is the vocab word, that's the evidence. Then you have this clause separated by two commas, a powerful confederation of Hindu people on the western side of South Asia. That, remember, that's the appositive. That's the noun clause that defines Marathas. And you know you have to do more than just define terms in this class. And then what comes next? Now it has to land back on the topic page. And by the way, when you didn't make a good grade on the appositive connections, it's because a lot of people who didn't do well on this simply didn't put in that third column anything relevant to the topic page or the historical development. It's got to land back on that page, and it should read as a complete sentence from left to right on those positive connections. So Marathas, a powerful confederation of Hindu people on the western side of South Asia, launched several raids against the Mughal leaders of the empire, thus weakening their power. So there we go. We've given some evidence about that supports that claim. And then, anytime you can put more evidence and elaborate in your argument, it's going to make that better. You could follow up with this sentence. During the rule of Akbar, there were peaceful relations between the Muslim Mughals and the Hindus they ruled over. However, after Akbar's death, less tolerant leaders oppressed them. This led to the formation of the Marathas, who attacked the Mughal state several times. This led to the weakening, or became an obstacle to Mughal rule. So there you have it, all packaged together. We use one word, Marathas, and we showed how it was an obstacle. We supported our claim that resistance was an obstacle to state centralization and expansion. So I'm going to give you another set. I want you to use all the words I give you, write a solid paragraph, and submit it in It's Learning. And that is your lesson for the first 2 days of the year, which we're all virtual on. All right, see you guys next week. All right, take care.